actually, even in that regard, I'll tell you that I will always say I love Nier Automata, but I don't know if I want to go back to Nier Automata now that I finished it. Like, I don't know if I want to run through that storyline again because it felt so satisfying to come to the conclusion of that.
Right.
Finally on the show, we have a Delving Deeper. And, Alex, what are we going to be delving deeper into?
Things, stuff, caves, ideas, an episode. And I believe... Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
It's one of those things, yes. But what one of those things are we actually...
All of them. We were going to dive into a topic brought to us by our lovely brand designer and creatures creator, Crave, Graveyard, perhaps, if you've seen them on our Discord, hanging out occasionally. Anyways, they prompted the idea of what brings us back to games.
Yes, and I think this is a good one for us because there are a handful of games that you and I have been back to several times. Ones that I could have probably gone right back into immediately and would have no reservations about doing so.
Sure.
Those would include ones like Fallout New Vegas, for instance.
Or KOTOR.
KOTOR, yeah.
For you.
I could load up KOTOR tomorrow and be perfectly happy with it. I don't know which ones for you would really count.
Oh, there's a ton. For instance, I could go back and play Warhammer 40k Dawn of War 2 Retribution.
Oh, okay.
Inquisitor Martyr, I went back to the other day. I want to see if they updated stuff and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Skyrim, I can go back to anytime just it's to fuck around in.
Yeah, sure.
But I think just games specifically isn't the point here. I think it's like, why do we do this?
Yeah. So I think in order to talk about that, we'd have to kind of get to the heart of the reason why we
the cards.
What?
The heart of the cards, Yuki.
No, it's not the heart of the cards. I'm not.
Anyways.
No, that explains why people go back to play The Witcher 3 because of Gwent.
Yes.
But I would be more interested in like the actual heart of the game that we engage with, because I think that kind of explains the whole thing. I think one of the big characteristics is that it has to be a game that can constantly surprise you. I think that you have to have games that will allow you to go through scenarios in different ways or open up ideas that you want to explore in a different way.
I think on the contrary, it doesn't have to surprise you. I think sometimes it's a sense of familiarity.
Okay, yeah.
Which is one of the things that I think they've done a little bit of research on, for instance, is with like rewatching shows you've seen before. Is a really good catharsis for people.
Yeah. So
it's nice and relaxing for you because you've seen it, you know what's gonna happen, you don't have to think about what to expect. And you can just be like, it's like rereading a book that you've read and you love. It's like when I go back to reread The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, it's like I've read this book multiple times. And it's like, I know what happens. I may not remember every little detail, but it's a sense of familiarity and enjoyment from something you've experienced before. I had a friend of mine who watched Burn Notice.
Oh, yeah.
And it was a comfort show for them.
Yeah.
So like I'd go over occasionally, we'd have tea and just watch Burn Notice. And it was just nice. It was relaxing. It was cozy.
Yeah. Getting your Michael Weston on.
Yep.
So you can find
getting your Sam in.
You got to get some Sam Axe in your life and some Fiona blowing stuff up. That's always good.
But it was just like, this is a show I enjoy. It's catharsis. So for where you said surprising you, that is also really good for games. To be able to keep coming back. Like maybe you want to play Fallout, and it's like maybe you're gonna try something different, and you go somewhere else that you've never been to again. You just get surprised by the dialogue. It's something that happens. But I think the sense of familiarity can also be really good for a lot of these games too.
I don't think that they're necessarily mutually exclusive, because you can have game worlds that are familiar to you, but in aspects that you never experienced before. So,
Sure.
like, take a Kingdoms of Amalur is probably a good example for this, because that's one we both went back to. I think that we go back to it because you're very familiar with the world from the very first time that you get into it. But you don't really do the same things every single time, and you might go
Well,
to different areas.
sometimes you do the same build every time.
I keep doing the same build every single time, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I try the same things all the time.
Right.
Yeah. But I think the concept of, going back to things that are familiar to you. Have you ever heard of a concept called comfort movies or comfort food?
Yeah,
comfort
it's
food.
I think
It's
the
that.
same concept I was saying with the shows being comfort,
Sure.
familiarity. It's easy. It doesn't take a lot of brain power for you to enjoy it.
Sure.
You
Yeah.
know, so you either watch it or you eat it because it's just comfortable.
In some ways, that also explains the actual pick up and play nature of games that you're actually familiar with. Because when I start a new game, one of the things that will keep me from playing too long or jumping off of it fast is if it feels too obtuse at the start. If
Right.
I don't really engage with it, and they have to explain a lot about those games too.
Oh yeah, there's two different extremes there, and we talked about that in the last one where like farming sim,
Yeah.
where you're like, it didn't explain anything to me really, and just
Yeah.
kind of dropped you in expecting you to know everything. That's one extreme.
Right.
And then there's a game. Well, I guess that's on the same extreme. I was gonna say Elite Dangerous, but there's another extreme where it explains way too much.
Yeah.
Like, here's everything that you need to know all at once, but it's like, just let me get into the game. And like, I know, like, I don't know if you tried New World ever,
No, I didn't.
but the tutorial was very linear. It took about 15 minutes total, and it just was like, here's how to move, here's how to attack, dodge, roll, here's how to jump, here's the basic gameplay core, like how to do things, and then go. And everything
Yeah.
else got explained later.
Right.
One of the few things I think they did right.
Right, yeah. Gameplay loops are going to be really important in that too, especially when they, intersect with each other, because I think that means that you're going to get kind of interesting experiences seeing that. Borderlands is that for me, because I can see the actual leveling RPG systems and also like the looting system that comes into it like consequentially. And so it always feels a little bit different, even though, I understand the rules of it. There's some consistency, and then there's also some difference that always happens, the random nature of it.
Yeah.
So I do like that. It causes me to come back because I don't know what I'm going to get, even though I understand it right up at the start.
Right, and I actually enjoy that looting aspect as well as something. For instance, with Warhammer 40k Retribution, or Dawn of
Yeah.
War Retribution 2,
Yeah.
or whatever it is, Dawn of War 2 Retribution, bleh, word salad, is, I can play the same game differently each time, but like, it's still the same missions, still the same plot, characters, everything, but I can play with them differently. Between the 6 armies you can play as, you can play either with all commanders or all elite units instead, and replace those commanding units and have a bigger army, and you can change out their skills and their loadouts to play a vastly different game. So I could do like, oh, well, I'm just going to do an all ranged build for my army, or maybe I'll be all melee, or maybe I'll just be like one commanding unit and then massive amount of like, troops instead. So there's ways you can do that. And then Inquisitor Martyr is just, there's the sheer amount of ways you can customize your character and their equipment. So there's a lot. Customization, I think, is also a big thing for me.
Yeah.
We're having a lot of customization, but not so much that it's like the skill tree, I think, in Path of Exile. I think has that massive tree that's just daunting.
I see.
But if you kind of like get people into it slowly and it's not overwhelming, it's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking one of the examples that I would use is something like a Diablo 2.
Well,
to try and
Inquisitor Martyr, Diablo 2.
yeah,
very...
I know they're hack and slashers, but
no. I just mean they're very similar in execution on how customizable it can be, which is really nice.
Right. But in terms of the striking a balance between the familiarity and also the ability to customize, to change, customize your experience. Diablo is a good example of that. Every time I play a Diablo 2, 3, whatever, I know how the story runs. I know the areas I'm going to go to. I know the acts, the chapters. I know the bosses that I'm going to fight. But that doesn't mean that I want to play the same character every single time. And so you can create a situation, and I feel like this is kind of where you get the games that you keep returning to after you've played them for a long period of time, is striking that balance between getting a variety in and also the familiarity of a game that you understand the rules to.
Another example for me is like World of Warcraft. I go back to fairly often. I haven't played it in several months now, but generally, I enjoy the gameplay and the story and the storytelling. And so it's comfortable and I can do it by myself or with friends. And it's like, I go back to it because I enjoy it. And there's things in it I can do even without doing like newest content if I want, where it's like, maybe I just want to go fishing for 5 hours in World of Warcraft. I mean, it's something you can do and it's really just relaxing.
Oh, yeah.
Or maybe you want to go do it. There are a lot of reasons people come back to games again and again. And another offshoot of this, for instance, is like tabletop, Nathan. Where it's not necessarily the same thing as video games, but like what drives you to keep playing D&D instead of branching out to another, TTRPG system, for instance. And I think perhaps for a lot of people, it could be the familiarity with the system and the brand in like D20 system is it doesn't take a lot to learn. Once you learn it, it doesn't take a lot to relearn a new edition necessarily. It's like, okay, it's still the same core, but then you have to just kind of figure it out. But then you have people who go and learn new games. And they're like, okay, it's a process to learn a new game. It's a time investment to learn a new game. I was telling you the other day when you were here that I have the PDFs for the Avatar Legends role-playing game. And I'm hoping to get the physical book eventually whenever they are done printing and sending them. But I've never played Powered by the Apocalypse. And so learning that is going to be a time investment. And, it's a time sink as well, because it's like, all right, well, now I need to read a rule book. And 300-page rule book is a bit daunting.
And it can be,
can be overwhelming, but it's like learning that can be fun. So in the case of why would I go to learn this instead of just sticking to D&D, it's because, well, they're offering me a setting specifically and a set of rules and that gameplay experience instead of something that's D&D, just generic D&D, or my own world. This is a IP from a big world that exists that people might be familiar with. I know Crave is familiar with Avatar and likes Avatar, so one of the reasons we got that is because, well, this would be a cool way to like do some role playing in a world that is really interesting as well. So I think what this comes back to is, why do we come back to games that we've already played again and again? And I think it's because we're comfortable with them.
I like the other part of that though is that things aren't always the same. Like,
right.
I keep thinking about this, and I was looking through spell lists the other day because I'm playing a spellcaster now in D&D. Is I kept finding that the spells that I really, really like, that I keep trying to take, are sort of, they have a lot of functionality and variety. You can use them in a lot of different ways and creative ways. So
Right.
you get to play around with, oh, how could I utilize this? I wonder if I could, use this in a certain way. And what you've essentially done is created a thing where it's like, well, now I got to build a character that uses these kinds of skills or these kinds of abilities.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to do that. Same thing, too, with like a lot of RPGs, because we talked about that is, well, obviously I'd like to see what a dark side Jedi looks like. And how that changes my gameplay now that I'm familiar with what it is this one way. Maybe I want to be a long-range sniper in New Vegas instead of being a brawler. Or I actually want to be a brawler for the first time ever and try punching people with the shotgun fist or something like that. There's functional mechanical changes that can take place. Now, on the opposite end of that, though, we can also learn a lot from the games that maybe we played really heavily that we never went back to. And
like you played for a short duration?
Or played all the way through, but have no interest of actually going back to.
Okay.
Yeah. And there is one that I probably will never pick back up, even though I can tell you that it's an excellent game, and it's legendary, and it's narratively brilliant.
Is it Greedfall?
No, it's not Greedfall. No. I did try to go back to Greedfall a couple times, but something just wasn't hitting for me. I guess in those systems that I just never felt quite comfortable with the way that it was presented. But it was Spec Ops: The Line, which you might have heard of at some point. So Spec Ops: The Line, when it originally came out, I did play that right through from beginning to end. That is how I played it, straight through from beginning to end. Not a particularly long game, mind you. It's probably only about 4 or 5 hours. It's not a very long game, but an incredibly good game with a great narrative structure and very interesting character development as it goes through, where there's a lot of those big, like, reveal moments where you realize that you may be the monster and possibly the villain of the story. Like, there's a lot of those, oh, what have I done? There's been a terrible thing, and dealing with that. The thing about it is that narrative goes through, you get to the end, there's like the last of 3 or 4 really big reveals. You go through that and you're like, wow, that was something else. And then you have to make a decision at the end about how you want to wrap that up. The thing about it is that when I went back, right after that, like to try and play again, because I knew how all of that was going to run, and you're pretty much doing the same, because the actual game is just cover-based shooting for the most part.
Yeah.
When I started doing that, it's like, oh, well, now I know why this is happening, which is neat. But I don't really want to run through that story again. Like, I want to just live with that story and not go back and re-experience it. I don't have that same relationship with that game. Because I don't think it was even made to be that kind of a game. And might be the reason why it never really got sequels or anything, because people don't interact with that in the same way. And actually, even in that regard, I'll tell you that I will always say I love Nier Automata, but I don't know if I want to go back to Nier Automata now that I've finished it. Like, I don't know if I want to run through that storyline again, because it felt so satisfying to come to the conclusion of that.
Right. An example of something to get away from that as well, where we were talking about Diablo. It's like Diablo 3. How many times have you played? You have Diablo 3 as well, right?
I've played Diablo 3, yeah.
So once they added in the adventure mode, the bounties and the challenge rifts and stuff, it's like, all right, well, you kind of only just play the story once. And then after that, everything is seasons. You just do the seasonal stuff, and what you do for seasonal stuff generally is, all right, hopping into adventure mode, not doing anything that's storyline, just doing bounties and
Sure.
Rifts and greater rifts and that stuff.
So, let me think
So
here.
it's you just skip the entire storyline of the game and just play the game.
Right, exactly.
And I think that is actually a good way to do something like that. Whereas Inquisitor Martyr, which is on the same type of game, they have seasons now as well, but there's no way to skip the story.
Yeah.
You can skip the couple intro missions. You can just, you've done this before. Do you want to skip the tutorial missions? It's like, yes, I do. But I would also like to not have the main storyline be something I need to do. Like, give me an adventure mode where I can just do missions and like bounties and things like that.
Sure.
Because having to go through that story again is terrible. It's so boring.
Yeah. No, I understand.
I don't want to go through these story missions again.
Yeah.
Give me something better.
Yeah.
And I've actually told them that.
Yeah. Diablo 3, I think I had played the once to the end, and then I did try it again when like Reaper of Souls came out. And so I could play the additional content with a different character.
Sure.
One that I find really interesting that I actually have a hard time going back to, even though it seems like the kind of thing you'd want to screw around with, is almost every single Ubisoft game.
Yeah.
Like, I'll play the Ubisoft title, I'll play any Assassin's Creed you give me, I'll play, like, any Far Cry game you give me, any of them, Watch Dogs, you name it. But usually once I'm done playing it, I will put it down and have little interest in picking it back up or starting it again.
I feel that.
Yeah.
I've gotten several of the Assassin's Creed
Cream. Applied directly to the dagger.
I did pick up like Far Cry Primal, I think, and I picked up Watch Dogs Legion and stuff when they're all on sale,
Sure.
It's like, all right, and like I enjoy them. I got Valhalla, and it's like, all right, this is fun. And then I put it down, and it's like,
yeah, because you know exactly what you're going to do when you get back into it. And
and again, I think we talked about this before with Cyberpunk, and for instance, it's like, Cyberpunk's really fun now. And I think they do the formula that Ubisoft did better than Ubisoft did.
Oh, yeah. Now I actually go to Cyberpunk, and I will mess around just a little bit. What I did find is that I won't stay in it too long because I think I have finished like every notable piece of content for the character, and I might though go back and try a different character build if I wanted to run through the story. But yeah, Ubisoft is a hard one, I think, just because once they kind of establish the few game mechanics and the things that they're going to do in the game, you realize you're going to do those over and over again. The one that I was willing to go back to was I did get the Ezio collection. So that would be 2, Brotherhood, and Revelations. And I have to say that those games, maybe just because of the narrative structure and seeing the characters and, doing all of the side missions and stuff, work pretty well for multiple playthroughs. But you have to be kind of invested because people liked Ezio, so it's one of those things. The rest of them, it's hit or miss. It's very hit or miss because they don't necessarily lend themselves to the kinds of mechanics that you want to keep coming back to, or the storylines that you have a deep interest of experiencing in another way, or, in a remix. That's kind of what it is, too, isn't it? It's the idea that you remix what you've done in a new and interesting way. I choose a different character class this time. I choose a different build this time. I go in this other direction. It's still the game. I know the game, but I've changed aspects of it. I'm trying to experience it in a slightly different way. So it's that familiarity mixed with the variety and how those two can come together in new and interesting ways. But games kind of have to lend themselves to be that sort of game, and I don't know if every one of them wants to be. I think I will have trouble going back to a lot of shooters for that very reason, especially episodic ones. Sometimes the big open world games will just be that. They'll be big open world games, and you screw around with them, and then you're done. You jump off of them. But then again, Stardew Valley. I will make my ancient fruit production, my wine production every single time, and I will keep enjoying trying it.
Yeah, I think when it comes down to it, I think a sense of familiarity, a sense of something that can surprise you or interest you each time you play, and then a core gameplay loop that you enjoy. I think I would call those like the three main factors of why we particularly might come back to games.
Sure.
Obviously, there can be specific keys other people enjoy, but for us, I think familiarity, intrigue, that's what I'm going to call that, and then a core gameplay loop that is just enjoyable every time you pick it up.
Yeah. In order to get me excited to begin with, that core gameplay loop has to be accessible enough that I want to get into it, but I think complex enough that I keep going back and trying to dig into what that is.
And I think that's why you and I have slightly different play styles for games, where I enjoy the simulator games a bit more, I think.
Sure.
And I don't think you enjoy them quite nearly as much as I do, for instance, Farming Sim, but we'll see. We're going to find out.
We're gonna
in the past, from when this episode airs in the past, we will have found out if learning how to play a game a little bit better might make you enjoy it a bit more. But I feel like you're still gonna be like, okay, well, this is better, but it probably won't stick around a while. So we'll see.
I don't know if it's my particular cup of tea. But then again, sim games are kind of like all over the place. At some point, maybe we'll do a thing about how the simulator family, about everything being a simulator. It is like you can practically categorize those into like 3 different categories of like the ones that are actually trying to be realistic, the ones that are kind of trying to be silly, and then the ones that are just ridiculous in the first place, and how you interact with them very, very differently. But at any rate, I think mostly that it's, if a game really grabs you from the start and you can see the possibilities of how you'd like to play or what you'd like to do, that feeling almost of, oh, yeah, what if I had done this? What if I had tried this? That question mark that's in your head about that game that you remember playing. I think that draws you back. It's that whole aspect, like those 3 that you were mentioning a second ago. Those lead you back to it over and over again. But I suppose we should just ask the audience if there are any games that you get drawn back to,
or any concepts.
Yeah. One, what kinds of mechanics and design choices do games make that lead you to come back to them? And also, do you have examples in your own life of those kinds of games? Because I know everybody's a little bit different, but I am wondering if there's ones that are that have a higher hit ratio of return shots. That's a sport reference, isn't it?
I have no idea.
Cool.
Making another left-hand turn.
Yep. There's an E. One more E in left.